Roll your fingers close around me, long and spindly breath becomes me. Heaven, can you see what I see? Hey, you pale and sick child, you...
Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Today is August 21st, 2020, and this is our maiden voyage of a new episode that we're going to be doing periodically called The Fathers and Sons. Before I talk about that, our first guest is going to be Ben Greenfield, who'll be with us in just a minute. I have to, of course, thank my title sponsor, Legendary Food. The website is eatlegendary.com. The coupon code is SHR10 to get 10% off your entire purchase of some of the greatest snacks. If you're a low carb, low sugar, keto kind of person, high protein, you're going to love everything they have there. Check them out, eatlegendary.com, SHR10. I've done shows over the years where I've talked about the fact that more men successfully commit suicide every year. More men are addicted to drugs and alcohol. More men are institutionalized. More men are incarcerated. And you would think that people would be paying attention to this, right? This is like very gender specific. Why is this happening? What's happening? We have a lot of problems today. And more people are being vocal about fatherless households. For years, the father really didn't matter if you're a man. They have a center for women and families. They don't have a center for women, men, and families. When you hunt, you could take a buck or two, but you got to have a tag to get a doe, and you usually can only take one doe. And so, I really started to think that fathers, at least my father, now that I look back and he's gone, play a large role in who their sons become. That's not to say that mothers don't play a role as well, but fathers are where boys learn to become men. And I'm going to bring my guest on now. He is walking in his typical approach whenever he does a podcast. How you doing, Ben?
I'm good. I'm huffing and puffing a little more than usual. I've got an elk hunt coming up in a couple weeks, so all my walks now, I got this 50-pound weighted vest on, and feels good though. Feels good to load up the body, get a little stroll in, and I'm happy to be talking to you, Carl.
Yeah, I'm happy to be talking to you too. I wanted you to be the first person to do this because I've watched you from afar. I see the things that you do with your boys. I know you've even gotten your boys to start doing a podcast here and there, being a thought leader, if I can call you that, puts a great deal of weight on a person, no pun intended. And I often wonder what effects that has on the young men in the family. I want to start off with, I've got a list of questions I want to go through. So to just humor me for a second.
Okay.
So who influenced you the most as a young boy?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, my father was not fully present. His father was not fully present for him. That's something I'm very focused on breaking in terms of that cycle with my own sons, that cycle of working, providing for the family, fulfilling Maslow's hierarchy, but being absent in the process, right? Having your children's idea of you providing for the family being associated with seeing the back of your head when you walk out the door, and then you being exhausted at the end of the day and maybe not even present for say a family dinner or family time at night. And so for me growing up, my father was a serial entrepreneur. He was a firefighter up until I was 13, and then a bunch of businesses after that. And I love my dad. We have a good relationship now, but he was certainly not fully present in my life growing up. A lot of the things I had learned growing up, everything from how to shave, how to fish, how to hunt, how to field dress, how to lift weights, all that stuff. I I kind of had to teach myself. I learned a lot just from YouTube and books and being homeschooled K through 12. For me, I was pretty comfortable with that idea of self-education and being a self-made man. But really, I'm often asked who my mentors have been, who the influential people in my life have been, and I've never really been the type of guy who turns to mentors. I didn't really have a lot of that growing up either. So for me, really my primary influences were books, authors like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Arthur Conan Doyle. And I spent a great deal of time with my head down in books growing up. And then, from there, I've certainly had men that I've learned a little bit from here and there along the way. But ultimately, for me, it was a lot of self-education and self-mentorship. So I don't necessarily think that's the way that things should be, but that's the way that things work for me.
Well, so we're staying with this theme. Who in your journey has contributed to what you feel a good father is? Are there men that you knew that you thought, when I have boys or when I have children, I'm gonna integrate that into the way I am a father?
Not necessarily. There are men who I certainly bounce things off of in the community. I talk to guys like Ben Pekulski and Elliot Holtz, and even some guys who are in the younger phases of fatherhood, like Kyle Kingsbury, for example. A lot of guys in the fitness sector who are trying to raise their boys to be strong young men, and we certainly encourage each other and build each other up. But in terms of an ideal father, I never really had anyone who I really placed on a pedestal as an ideal father, aside from, I suppose, if you were to count this, which I think you arguably could, it would just be God. For me, growing up as a Christian and having the Bible by my bedside every morning and every night, I saw how not only God led the Jewish people and eventually all people as a loving father, but there were also a lot of examples of strong men in the Bible that I'd turn to, and even strong fathers, folks like King David, for example, people like Moses and Aaron and Gideon and Samson and a lot of these strong leaders in the Bible. I admired them quite a bit as well. And a big theme that you see over and over again in those examples is sacrifice, selflessness, but also, a great amount of strength kind of combined with love, being a disciplinary leader and being able to lead the family as a true father and as a king, but not in a spirit of dictatorship or authoritarianism, but rather from a spirit of love. And that's really the way that I've approached fathering my own boys, educating them about the consequences of their decision, leaving them as much as possible to be able to make their own decisions and live with the consequences. But, occasionally I do lay down the law, and ask them to do things they might not otherwise do. This past, series of weeks during the COVID lockdown, for example, I've had them in the sauna every single night, doing 30 to 45 minutes of deep breath work and sweating. And then, from there going into, 30, 33 degrees in a cold pool and just sitting for 2 to 3 minutes and be comfortable with your breath as your body freezes and learning how to control your physiology via your breath. Those are things that they would not voluntarily do. Yet I tell them they need to do those things with me because I know that it's going to help them become stronger men and stronger leaders themselves.
Do you feel discipline is different for boys versus girls? I don't think you have any daughters. Do you have daughters? You don't have any daughters, right?
Not yet.
No,
my wife
okay.
and I are actually we're trying for a third child, and I'd be happy as a clam if it were a daughter. But no,
Do you think it's different for boys? Discipline is different for boys than girls?
Not necessarily. I think that some amount of discipline is going to help to refine and mold any individual. In terms of boys, I think that sometimes the physical disciplines are things that they need more than girls. If I had a little girl, I don't know if I'd be doing as much like, kettlebell swinging in the garage and, sandbag beatdowns up and down the driveway and, wilderness survival excursions. But at the same time, I do know a lot of women who are very strong and they are, hunters and weightlifters and, and they're strong women. I think that as long as you're able to do that and maintain some amount of feminine essence, then, that's certainly something that could work. But I can't say I can speak from personal experience in terms of the difference in discipline between boys versus girls.
How about non-negotiable things? So I learned a long time ago, raising children, you have to kind of pick your fights. Are there non-negotiable things for you, maybe as the boys get older, that you already have said, this is where I'm going to draw the line? This kind of stuff is not going to happen.
Not necessarily. There's certainly, things that I know are not going to serve a young man well, such as use of pornography. I think that sets kids up from a dopaminergic standpoint to be in a very, very significant evolutionary mismatch when it comes to them, being surrounded by images or photos or access to members of the opposite sex as potential mates that, from an evolutionary standpoint, would have been very rare. Like we never would have been surrounded by, large amounts of beautiful women that we could copulate with. And I think that just basically exhausts the dopaminergic pathways very quickly. And, there's great websites like, yourbrainonporn.com that kind of highlight the reason that is. In a situation like that, the way I lay down the law in our home is I teach the boys about those dopamine pathways, about neurotransmitters, about the way that we would have been with women from an ancestral standpoint. And then there is no rule in our house that says, oh, you can't go to porn websites. I mean, they can do, for a large part, screen time, consumption of gluten, dairy, porn access, anything that might be considered potentially harmful physically or biologically. I don't require them to abstain from those things, but I teach them about the consequences of those decisions. As far as non-negotiables, I can't say that there's been many times in raising my boys when I've had to put my foot down and simply say, you're not going to do that. Maybe that's because I've just gotten lucky and I've got good boys. But no, there's not a whole lot of non-negotiables in our house. Probably the main thing that we do every single day without fail is we gather as a family on the front porch, if it's in the summer, out in the sunshine, or if it's in the winter, in the living room by the fireplace. And we meditate for 10 minutes as a family each morning. Deep breathing, usually some kind of good music in the background, eyes closed, connected to our breath, 6 count in, 6 count out, tongue resting on the bottom of the mouth, dark empty space in the back of the eyes. And we do that every single morning. We follow that up with gratitude journaling, and then writing down one person who we can pray for or help or serve that day. And that's every single morning. And that is kind of I guess you would say, non-negotiable. And then every single evening, we have giant, lovely, joyous family dinners, sometimes with people over, sometimes with just our family. They're typically an hour to an hour and a half long. Everyone pitches in and makes food. Everyone helps. And then afterwards, we all go into the boys' bedroom. I play the music on the guitar or the ukulele, and then we return to our journals and we bookend the day by writing down in a process of self-examination, what good have I done this day? And then what could I have done better this day? Right. So we're learning from our failures, and we're having to go back and analyze each day and how it actually went, which I think is a very powerful exercise in and of itself. And then both of my boys have purpose statements. They have one single succinct purpose statement for their lives. And in addition to the self-examination at the end of the day, we write down, what is one way that I fulfilled my life's purpose today? And so every single morning we have that meditation with gratitude and service. Every single evening, family dinner, music, self-examination, and purpose statement. And if those were not present in our home, it would feel very strange. We've woven those in as something as habitual as brushing one's teeth, or exercise or anything else that we might do. Those are just I suppose, non-negotiables.
Are the boys allowed to change their purpose statement? Is it something that's organic and evolving, or is it this is it for the rest of your life?
The purpose statement definitely evolves. That's important for people to know. My own purpose statement for years was to empower people to live a more adventurous, joyful, and fulfilling life. And that was great when I was all over the globe participating in, Ironman triathlons and Spartan races, and really considering myself as kind of like a guy out there in the front lines of battle, inspiring others to go to battle and to live their own adventures. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that I want to step into more of a little bit of a mentorship role, and also become more intimately connected to some of the more creative aspects of life, and some of the things that I think at this point in my life are going to move the dial more in terms of impact and purpose. And so now it's not to empower people to live a more adventurous, joyful, and fulfilling life. Now my purpose statement is to read, write, learn, teach, sing, speak, compete, and create in full presence and selfless love to the glory of God. Right. And so that might change 2 years from now. Both of my boys' purpose statements are largely centered around using their love for art and culture to entertain people, to educate people, and to inspire people, and to inspire feelings of strong emotion like joy and laughter. And so those are their purpose statements. My wife's purpose statement is very, very simple. Hers is simply to minister to her family every day in the best way possible. And, all of these purpose statements may change. And that's what's important is to understand that, as life changes, as you enter new chapters, a book that is your life, you may find that the purpose statement that might have really inspired you to go out and whatever, race or compete or, build a business, it might change. And that's perfectly acceptable, and something that you should certainly give yourself permission to do.
So going from a boy to a man yourself and observing the journey in the rearview mirror, do you think that there are any important qualities that young boys must learn in order to have good, enjoyable, fulfilling, successful lives?
Yeah, I think that you could largely chunk things as falling into the category of physical disciplines, mental disciplines, and spiritual disciplines. I think that physical disciplines, those are something that you've talked about exhaustively on the show, and we know that that a child can grow up with strength, power, speed, balance, mobility, coordination, playing a wide variety of sports, as David Epstein points out quite well in his recent book Range, the importance of that versus single sport specialization, and then getting exposed to a wide variety of functional skills. And so what I do is every Sunday I write out what my boys' workouts for the week are going to be. And some of those are working out alongside me. Some of those are their own routines. Some of them aren't traditional workouts. They might involve, for example, yesterday their workout was 40 rounds of Wim Hof breathing, followed by 2 minutes in the cold plunge, get out of the cold plunge, do 30 push-ups, and do 3 rounds of that, right? So that's just breath work, cold, and body weight calisthenics. But then, 3 days ago, we all had our bows out. We had 60-pound backpacks on, and we were doing quarter-mile loops of the trail around our house. Stop after each quarter-mile loop, take 3 shots. Well, you let the heart rate go down. You train yourself to focus while under stress. Then you do another loop, right? And so those physical disciplines, just a broad range of physical disciplines, I think that's important. The next would be mental disciplines. And what I mean by that is that, I really think that every kid, boy or girl, should have a strong grasp of 5 basic mental disciplinary skills that I think are going to set you up for success in any career, whether you're going to go to engineering or law or medicine, you name it. And those skills would be reading. In other words, the ability to be able to assimilate information at a relatively rapid pace and digest that information and train the muscle that is used to digest that information. So, every week I select one book from the bookshelf in our massive library downstairs, and I assign it to the boys. Often it's a book they wouldn't normally choose themselves, meaning that it might be 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, or it might be Principles by Ray Dalio. Not books that a 12-year-old would normally choose. and their goal is, or their assignment is to complete that book within a week's time and generate a 1 to 2 page book report from what they've read. And so they're growing up with this idea that the human brain can collect information at a relatively rapid pace. And I think reading is one. The second is writing, being able to dictate thoughts on paper in an intelligent manner, which is where those book reports fit in, as well as some other writing projects that they do. And it has to go beyond like a 140 character tweet or a text message, which is largely how I think young men and women these days are communicating, and instead involves being able to more eloquently lay out your thoughts in long written word format, which I think is a lost and disappearing skill as attention span and as the length of the information that we get exposed to seems to decrease with increasing frequency. I think that writing long form content is another really good skill in the mental disciplines category. And then in addition to reading and writing, some basic understanding of arithmetic, and especially arithmetic as it relates to life skills, right? So not just algebra and calculus equations for the sake of passing a test, but instead, for example, they spent last summer building a tree fort, learning angles, learning geometry, calculating the amount of materials that they need for the roof, for the flooring, for the beams. Whenever we go to a restaurant, they're in charge of calculating the tip. Whenever we go shopping at the grocery store, they're in charge of finding the best deals, right? So mathematics, but mathematics applied in a very logical way to life. And then the last two, in addition to reading, writing, and arithmetic for the mental disciplines, would be logic or computer programming, right? Either one or both, but just basically being able to think in terms of A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. Being able to simply think logically. And in our day and age, that might also include things like, for example, they have a subscription to a service called Bitsbox, where they get this little box of app and computer coding materials sent to our house, and they simply sit down with their computers or their iTouches and work on programming based on that box that they receive. And then the final one would be rhetoric/persuasion, right? Being able to argue, being able to understand game theory, being able to speak in a way that defends your position. A big part of that, honestly, is just our family game nights. I mean, every single night we're playing Scrabble and Quiddler and Boggle and Canasta and Hold'em. All these games that develop a strong sense of game theory, but that also really engage, in many cases, rhetoric, argumentation, being able to defend a position. And that also includes things like, speech and debate, theater, just this idea of being able to not just write what it is that you're thinking in an elegant fashion, but being able to speak that as well. And so reading, writing, arithmetic, logic, and rhetoric, I think are 5 kind of non-negotiables when it comes to the mental disciplines that you lay down in addition to the physical disciplines. And then the last category, and I think this is very important, and again, an oft neglected component, would be the spiritual disciplines. Spiritual disciplines are something that we weave into the boys' life every day, and I briefly alluded to those earlier, but that would be things like gratitude, journaling, meditation, breath work, silence and solitude, fasting, some amount of immersion in like religion or a belief in a higher power or a study of spirituality. And I think that those really help to feed the soul, which is often neglected, even in many young individuals. And I think once you put those 3 together, that wide range of physical disciplines, those 5 non-negotiables, reading, writing, arithmetic, logic, and rhetoric for your mental disciplines, and then a whole host of spiritual disciplines, which you can learn more about in, excellent books like, Richard Foster's Celebration of Disciplines, or, there's another great book called The Spiritual Disciplines Handbook by Adele Calhoun. Then you've kind of got things set up for a well-rounded individual who's incorporated a lot of what I would consider to be very, very good disciplines and habits for building a well-rounded adult.
Do you ever talk to your boys about aggression, self-defense, when it's appropriate, when it's not?
I don't talk to them that much about that, and the reason for that is because my friend Adam Smith is an amazing jiu-jitsu instructor who also does a lot of anti-bullying classes, self-defense classes, and trains children how to use violence responsibly. Growing up, I did a lot of roughhousing with the boys. I I printed off these giant wall posters that would involve, games like, standing on one leg and playing the sword game where you're trying to hit each other with your finger, and, and big tug of wars, and a lot of kind of like hand-to-hand combat that I do with them when they were 3, 4, 5 years old. Starting at 8 years old, they started working with Adam 3 times a week in jiu-jitsu, and he's just so good at teaching them a lot of those principles as far as responsible use of violence, self-defense, and especially with jiu-jitsu, self-defense in a manner that might not really harm the other individual as much as kind of put them to sleep. I don't know if the right word is outsourced, but I trust the man that's training my boys in self-defense. So they go and roll with a bunch of other boys and girls at his jiu-jitsu clinic 2 or 3 times a week. He comes up to the house 1 or 2 times a week and trains them privately. And so, he combines it with a little bit of striking, but for the most part, a lot of their self-defense is something that I have a guy working with them on.
So we have a question from someone watching on YouTube, a Faith Fitness guy. He says, we've done well with the trivium and spirituality. I don't know what trivium is, but he says, but what would you suggest for getting children interested in physical culture?
Yeah, by the trivium, I think he's actually referring to the classical education principles that really are what I described earlier, the
Right.
reading, writing, logic, and arithmetic, and rhetoric. And for the physical disciplines, it is a little bit interesting because, for example, my boys, if given the choice, would probably spend most of their time indoors painting and reading, which is kind of weird for me because I was really into physical culture at about their age and had a lot more of an inclination to kind of go outdoors. I played a lot of tennis. I did a lot of kind of like hiking in the hills back behind our home, building big rock walls and rock fortresses and all sorts of things like that. And they're a little bit more kind of like creative, romantic, and a lot more kind of dialed into art. And so, for them, it's been a few things. First of all, doing the workouts with dad and also having every Sunday night, they both have their little MacBooks that they use for their schooling. And I have a shared Google document they get every Sunday night, along with a checklist that they are workouts I specifically designed for the boys. That's just that they complete by the end of the week. They got to have them all checked off. That's just part of their training each week. And then, you throw a lot of noodles at the wall to see what sticks. We put them in basketball, we put them in soccer, we put them in jiu-jitsu, we put them in tennis. Even things like, horseback riding and skateboarding and mountain biking and paddle boarding. And then you just kind of step back and see what it is they're really interested in, see what camps they come back from and say, oh, that was amazing, I want to go back. And really for our kids, the main things that really seem to have stuck are jiu-jitsu, tennis, hiking/hunting, like a lot of kind of like the wilderness survival type of stuff. And I would say plant foraging kind of fits in along with that as well. And then anything related to the water, like swimming, paddle boarding, anything along those lines. And so seeing what it is that really lights them up, those are the type of things that I continue to surround them with. And if I see a new camp or a new sport arise that I think it'd at least be interesting for them to get exposed to, I'll put them in the camp and they'll spend a few days, and sometimes they'll just come back, and you can tell it wasn't a huge highlight for them. Basketball being a perfect example, which was super surprising to me because I loved basketball growing up. I begged my parents to go to basketball camp. I would be in like 6 basketball camps every summer, and my kids, they shoot hoops with me occasionally in the driveway, and that's about it. And that's fine. But, at the same time, they know more jiu-jitsu holds and moves than I do. That's because that's what they enjoy. That's what they've decided they like to kind of explore. Same thing with tennis. So, you expose them to a wide variety via camps, via mentors, via tutors, via excursions with you, and then you just kind of step back and see what sticks.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We have questions and comments loading up here. This is very fascinating. I think several people have already mentioned how inspiring some of this information is. And I think it's really important because we have to help boys become men. I interviewed Dr. Judy Kuryansky about 10 years ago, and I found something she said fascinating. She said boys cry more frequently boy babies cry more frequently than girl babies until boys are around 5 years old. And that's because they're told boys don't cry. And I had made this connection, and I said, well, maybe that's why we have so many men addicted to drugs and porn and alcohol and in institutions and committing suicide, because boys are taught at a young age that you're not supposed to display those kind of emotions. And I think go ahead. I'm sorry. Go.
You know what? We can get into it after the commercial break. I
Okay.
disagree.
Okay.
I think there's another reason for that. But
Okay.
I also have a thought about the emotional piece as well, and
Okay.
about the crying. So yeah, we can jump into that.
Let's do that. Let's take that on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be
Okay.
right back with more of Ben Greenfield. Stay tuned. Suction Complex BPC Oral from drseeds.com. Listen to Maggie Kuhn, one of the owners of the C-Bus Lifting Company gym in Columbus, Ohio.
I had been having some nagging tendon issues that weren't injuries, just things that were annoying. You know, I'm 58 years old, so just older tendon kind of issues. For us powerlifters, you know, we really don't stop training when we have just nagging issues. We just kind of keep pushing through. And I started the BPC. What I noticed was I was doing some heavy tricep stuff that would have killed me before when I had an elbow problem, and I was able to do this with literally no pain at all.
Go to drseeds.com, drseeds.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your bottle of BPC Body Protection Complex today. You've heard me talk about the chill pill on the show and how effective it is at helping people who suffer from social anxiety, or sometimes when you just want to take the edge off to a long, stressful day. Well, listen to this story from Dylan Goutreau.
Definitely takes anxiety away, which I have a long history of having. Started out at 2 milligrams a day of Xanax. That was at 8 years old. And so I stopped using benzos 3 years ago. Extremely difficult. Yeah, so I spent about 3 years trying to find anything and everything I could that would be healthy for me to help with anxiety. Because I'm talking, you know, full out panic attack. The chill pill was the first thing that I found that actually in the middle of a panic attack I can take, and it definitely subsides.
Go to drseeds.com. That's drseeds.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your first bottle of the chill pill. Check it out. I promise this is one supplement that delivers.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon.
Among the easiest and most popular ways to experience the life-altering benefits of hemp, Planet Earth CBD soft gels offer fast-acting effects as they release quickly. Made in a GMP-compliant, US FDA-registered facility, you can count on Planet Earth's safe soft gels. These soft gels provide temporary relief from pain and so much more. Manufactured with the calming combination of chamomile and melatonin, you got yourself a long-needed CBD solution. 25 milligrams of nano-emulsified hemp extract per serving with anti-inflammatory agency. Planet Earth sleep-supporting soft gels will have you forgetting about today's worries for a better tomorrow. Unwind with Planet Earth CBD today.
Did you know that your gut is referred to as your second brain? In fact, at least 90% of your serotonin, your happiness chemical, is created in your gut. If you don't take care of your gut, you won't feel good, period. Bioptimizers recently released Cognibiotics, a new breakthrough probiotic formula that is clinically proven to enhance your brain function, your mood, and overall mental health. Most probiotics often include conflicting strains or quantities and can cancel each other out. Cognibiotics delivers the exact strain you need in exactly the right ratios and quantities. With a 365-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee, you can try them out for yourself to start feeling the incredible difference Cognibiotics makes in your mood, mind, and performance. For an exclusive offer to my listeners, go to cognibiotics.com/SHR. That's COGNIBIOTICS.com/SHR and use code SHR10.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Welcome back. I don't know if we lost Ben or not. I know he's
No,
walking. Oh, you're there. Okay. There you are.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, so let's pick that back up. So going into the break, I suggested this idea that boy babies cry more frequently than girl babies until they're told don't cry. And could that potentially be the reason why we have the abundance of men out there who are institutionalized, committing suicide, etc.?
Yeah, I think that boys naturally just tend to be a little bit more belligerent and have louder voices when they're babies. And, I'm not convinced that by us, hushing up boys and telling them that boys don't cry, we're creating violence later on in their lives. I think that in many cases, men have been taught that wearing your emotions on your sleeves and being very emotional, crying and being very in touch with your feelings is perhaps overemphasized in many cases versus stoicism, stiff upper lip. Like when you get hurt, you bite your upper lip, you try to keep the tears from coming, and you be tough and you handle it, because a lot of times, if I put one of my boys in the ice tub and they're in there freezing the ice tub and they start to cry, I don't tell them cry. I don't tell them, let out your emotions, let out your feeling. I tell them, start breathing through your nose. Okay. Smile to yourself, lean back, settle your emotions, be in control of your emotions, use your breath to control your physiology. You do not cry in the cold pool. You're training your nervous system to be resilient to stress, and resilience to stress does not involve crying under stress. Anybody knows that if you're in a fight and you start to cry, your tears cloud your eyes, you begin to feel a little bit more weak. We know that emotion can create motion, and sad emotions can create weak motion. And so this idea of suppressing suppressing boys in terms of telling them not to cry, I don't necessarily think that's making weak men. I think that there are times when a man should cry. I cry in front of my boys. I don't necessarily, if my boys are crying for a good reason, like a dog has died or a loved one is hurt or someone has done something to their brother or insulted their mother, or they know their father is going through a very tough time. I think those are all cases where crying could be appropriate. I think crying in response to physical stress is something that should actually be suppressed in boys. They should stay stoic and learn how to control their emotions, especially in the face of physical stress. But I think that beyond that, I should say one other thing, by the way. I don't think that should be equated with suppression of one's emotions overall, right? We know that if we look at an essay or a book like Bonnie Rare's 5 Regrets of the Dying, right? I wish I'd chosen to be happier. I wish I'd stayed in touch with old friends more. I wish I'd have been who I truly am instead of who I expected the world wanted me to be. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And what's the 5th? I wish I'd had the courage to express my true feelings and emotions, right? So I don't think having the courage to express your true feelings and emotions is something we should vilify, but I do think that guys should be taught that there are situations in which a man should stay stoic and strong and be a dependable foundation who's not shaking with tears when time gets tough. Now, I think one of the reasons for the violence and the irresponsibility amongst men in our society is twofold. Number one, you already alluded to, Carl, fatherlessness. The lack of a strong rock foundation, father, leader, and king who shows a boy what true responsibility is. And it's unfortunate in that in an era where men are raised where irresponsibility is acceptable, sleeping with multiple women, knocking them up, leaving them behind to raise the children on their own, creating a situation in which the government and the welfare state steps in to take the role of the father. I think that all of that is despicable. I think that fathers should be expected to be more responsible, to stick with their decisions. If they have a child, an unwanted child with a woman, you take responsibility, you marry her, you raise that child, you create a stable home for that child. And, I think that fatherlessness and weak fathers who run from their responsibilities because of the fun that they're having is one big issue. And a big reason for that is because those boys didn't grow up with a good role model. Those boys grew up with the same type of dads. So fatherlessness is one thing. The other thing is that boys never, or rarely in our day and age, at least in Western culture, unlike many hunter-gatherer cultures or indigenous tribes, have a recognizable passage into manhood, have a recognizable ceremony and an event that takes place somewhere between 13 and 17 years old that is usually some type of a crucible, some type of a kokoro, some type of an agoge, some type of Spartan-esque scenario in which that boy goes to hell and back, whether that be a wilderness survival excursion, solo days out in the wilderness, whether that be a physical event like a very difficult adventure race, whether that be a hunt where they're off killing their first animal to provide for the family, followed by a ceremony in which they're recognized as a man and they're expected to provide for their family more, to take care of themselves more, to pay their own bills more. We don't have something like that many men go through. And so men grow up looking like men anatomically, and in many cases, actually, even because they didn't have a rite to passage, using things like the gym and physical culture to try to look like even more of a man physically, yet they've never spiritually or mentally become a man, nor has society formally recognized them as a man. So we've got a bunch of big boy bodies running around with little boy brains and little boy souls because of the complete absence or near absence of a rite of passage in our society. Kids, and especially boys, need that recognizable ceremonial head nod towards the fact that they have become men and are responsible contributors to society. And I think that's very, very important for boys. And between the absence of that and then father absence, I think those are way bigger issues than the fact that, boys are being told they shouldn't cry.
I love it. I love it a lot. Do you give the boys the latitude to disagree with you?
Absolutely. That relates back to the rhetoric piece, to the argumentation piece. But the disagreements are usually around like games and game theory, or, the way that we might be cooking something in the kitchen, via something they've discovered, a different cookery technique or something like that. It's very seldom that they would actually disagree with me on something that's more of a principle, like, Dad, we don't think we need to be meditating every morning. And I think a big part of that is because you as a parent must demonstrate to your children that you believe hardcore what it is that you're teaching them to do or encouraging them or requiring them to do. Meaning, when there's downtime in our house, I'm not on Netflix, I'm not on my phone, I don't have a screen in front of my face. I've usually got my nose in a book, or I'm playing a musical instrument, or I'm exercising or bettering my body or my brain. And so, if I were to tell my boys that they have limited screen time, yet, I'm watching Netflix or binging on TV shows at night, or I've got my phone out at the dinner table, they're going to take that far less seriously and be far less likely to agree with me or to not push back on me compared to if I'm actually demonstrating exactly what it is that I'm recommending that they do. And because of that, we don't have any limited screen time in our house. They can play as many video games, watch as much TV as they want, but it's not even something that we do. It's not something our family identifies with. The TV's on like once a month for maybe like 20 minutes. And it's this idea that it must begin with you demonstrating to your children. And then it also must involve love. If your requirements for your children, boys or girls, are based around disciplinarianism, authoritarianism, dictatorship, you putting your foot down and saying, this is the way the house is going to be, versus you leading with love, you leading with kindness, you taking the time, because it does take time to sit down with your children. And you don't say, let's just use a silly example, like, our family doesn't eat gluten and you're not going to have any cupcakes when you go to Jimmy's birthday party, period. Put your foot down, walk away. No, I mean, I've spent 2 hours with my boys walking through the entire digestive system from my college anatomy books, showing them the villi, showing them where damage occurs, showing them the size of the gluten protein, showing them that single cell epithelial layer between the gut and the bloodstream, and explaining to them some of the issues with monocropping and the raping of our nation's soil, turning it into dirt, the abuse of animals, and the whole issue with modern agriculture. And between a lot of the agricultural issues and a lot of the issues with like a wheat that hasn't been prepared, soaked, fermented, sprouted properly, now they're fully equipped to make a decision. And now when they have a cupcake at their birthday party, they're not thinking, oh, I'm going to be in trouble with Dad. They're thinking, geez, I'm contributing to the complete degradation of our nation's soil, and I'm also destroying my gut potentially for the next 2 weeks if this is a concentrated source of gluten, and creating neural inflammation that's going to affect my sleep and my school performance the next day. Then they make the decision themselves. But that also means I had to take an extra 2 hours to plant that foundation. But that's how you teach children. That's how you teach with love and presence and sacrifice. And when you approach rule making that way, equipping your children with a full understanding of why a rule might be made, or why a requirement or even a suggestion might be made, you're far less likely to get pushback.
Well, you just turn the rule into a choice, right? And like, so rules are like, you must do these things. These are my rules. But when you educate the child into where the logic behind the rule would come from, now it's a choice. The child says, I'm choosing not to do this because it's not good for me. I like that. But you're right. Parenting takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes input. And a lot of people today either don't take the time or don't have the time. And sadly, the children are suffering from that. As boys go through puberty, they search for autonomy. And in doing so, they literally have to break away from dad being the alpha male. You cast a big shadow. Any ideas on how this is going to happen as the boys start to become older?
Yeah, I expect pushback. I expect that there will be times when they want to really strike out on their own, full independence. Maybe they don't want to join the family in meditation. Maybe they decide that they're just themselves, whatever, they're 14 years old, family dinners are dumb, they don't want to be part of the family dinners, et cetera, et cetera. And look, if I'm going to stand by my principles and I'm going to say, okay, well, when you're 14, which is when they're going to do this, you're going through a ceremonial rite of passage that's going to recognize your passage into manhood and your responsibility to take care of yourself, then I have to stand by my principles. And if I've told them that they're a man and they're responsible to take care of themselves, then that means that anything that might be a rule in our house is suddenly something that they full on make the decision about whether or not they're going to do. Because I can't say you're a man, you got to take care of yourself, but then also say, oh, but you must also do all these things that I've required of you. Now, what I can say is you're a man, you take care of yourself. And if you decide that you're going to live here, you're going to help to pay the bills, you're going to help to work, you're going to help to take care of the family. And as a part of that, that means that if they're not going to join with the family dinners, they're going to strike up on their own, they're going to do their own thing, then they're also going to need to provide their own shelter over their heads, get their own jobs. And basically, if they decide they're going to be independent, they got to take it all the way and be fully independent. And that's my plan for when they get to that stage. Right. If you want to step out and you want to be a man, you want to assert your manhood, fine. But understand that also involves me not paying for your food, you paying for your food, me not putting a shelter over your head, but you either paying rent for that bedroom that you have or else getting your own apartment. And so there's a lot of kind of downstream responsibility effects that come from you recognizing your child as a man. But I think that as long as independence is recognized as full independence, and that with independence comes responsibility, then that's the way that I plan to tackle that when the time comes.
So I want to take our last commercial break, and when we come back, I want to talk about mortality, because I didn't recognize my own mortality until I watched my father pass. It was amazing. It was like a moment where I watched him pass, and then I literally looked at him in that bed and I saw my own face. I saw my own features, and I thought, that's going to be me. There's no turning back. Once you're dying, you can't go, oh, I've changed my mind. And so my mortality became very front and center after my dad passed away. I want to talk to you about your mortality, and also, do you have plans to help the boys understand death better? And so that transition isn't as abrupt as it was, let's say, for me, okay?
Sure.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Ben.
If you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender, with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 25% off all beef and free shipping on orders of $100 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to Piedmontese.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. Over 11 million people in the U.S. have some form of retinal damage, also known as macular degeneration. This is expected to double to nearly 22 million by 2050. Artificial blue light, age, type 2 diabetes are all contributors. Doctors say there's no cure. ARMED is changing that opinion. In one clinical trial, 93% of patients had arrested or improved their condition. 54% reported lessening of glare, reduced dryness, and improved clarity and comfort. And 0% felt worse during treatment and no side effects. Take control of your macular degeneration or keep it from ever occurring. Go to wisechoicemedicine.com and get armed today.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
Unlock your potential with the best cognitive enhancement and anti-aging supplements on the market. PureNootropics.net goes the extra mile for the highest quality ingredients, third-party tested to make sure you only receive the best your money can buy. There's no better choice with their money-back guarantee and free shipping. Try their best-selling DHM. Dihydromyricetin prevents hangovers and helps deliver detox after a night of drinking. Get your DHM and other nootropics and longevity supplements from PureNootropics.net. The purest supplements around.
Spit that out right now. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Welcome back. We're talking with Ben Greenfield on this premiere episode of Fathers and Sons. And we have quite a few guests lined up for this. We'll probably do one of these once a month moving forward. It's a very, very interesting topic to me. And I think it's really a very important topic. It's a very overlooked topic. You know, none of us have a handbook on how to parent. And when we look at people who seem to be living outstanding lives, we have to recognize men are showing by example their children, their male children, their boys, that this is what a man is. And the more active men out there understanding that what they do is teaching their boys what a man is, I think we can really change a lot of the problems that we're having in society today, because it's, as we said earlier in the show, it really does start with households not having strong fathers. We know this now. So when I lost my dad, I literally saw myself laying in that bed fading away. And I didn't sleep well for a year because I kept waking up in the middle of the night realizing, my God, that's me. I'm not prepared for that, you know? And I actually did a bunch of exercises where I visualized my own death. I would lay in bed and imagine it's happening now and there's nothing I can do about it. And whatever I felt was unanswered or needed attention to, I fixed over the course of the next couple of years. But with that being said, it's really quite, it's devastating. Is there something you think that fathers can do aside from spirituality? Because spirituality does help a lot. Don't get me wrong. But aside from spirituality, you think there's anything that a dad can do to help their sons understand their own mortality and actually leverage it as opposed to be stifled by it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say 3 things come to mind, Carl. The first is that our overall approach towards death in our society is severely flawed. The recent COVID pandemic is a perfect example of that. Death is something to be feared. Death is something to be avoided at all costs. Death is dishonorable. Death is dirty. Death is nasty. Death is messy. Let's try to make it so nobody dies. That's really not the way that the world has worked for most of human history, right? Diseases, pandemics, plagues, viruses sweep across humanity. They take people out. Herd immunity is created. The population bounces back stronger and better able to deal with that in the future. Do people die? Yes. Is it sad? Yes. Is it necessary for humans to be able to flourish on this planet? I would argue also, yes. But the problem is when we fear death in the way that we have, and we simply hide people away when they're dying, say goodbye to our loved ones through closed plexiglass windows in a hospital while talking to them on Facebook Live because, God forbid, we also get exposed to a aerosolized viral particle that could kill us too. We live in this spirit of fear, not only fear of life, but also fear of death. And I think we need a more responsible view of death. And I think that rather than hiding old people away, whether it's via a virus or anything else, in hospice and in nursing homes, and dishonoring our elders in that way, we must honor our fathers and our mothers and our parents and the older people in society. They must live with us, be a part of our homes. We must sacrifice for them in the same way that we might sacrifice for our youth. Give them honorable deaths. Allow their death to be a celebration. Allow their death to be an occasion that's full of honor and that involves us placing them into the ground in a manner that remembers them fondly and the epic legacy that they have left. And if that's the way that we would honor our elders in society, and if that's the way that we would embrace death, then I think that it would really change the way that we view a lot of issues in our society related to death and healthcare overall. Secondarily, I think that death is only the beginning, and perhaps this is my bias as a man of religion, but this belief that we are all a bunch of chunks of flesh and blood floating on a giant rock through space, trying to see who can have the most sex, amass the most cars, get the biggest house, make the most money, then we die, game over, and we turn into dirt, I think really is not a very magical or hopeful way to live life. There's a reason that, Dan Buettner, when he studied the blue zones, found greater health, lower blood pressure, greater longevity, decreased risk of most causes of mortality in people who practice a religion or had a belief in a higher power. And I think a big reason for that is the immense hope and peace and joy that pours into your life all day long. And the fear of death tends to be softened quite a bit by the recognition that death is simply passage into eternal bliss, and that we are just getting started with life on this planet, and that when we die, we're going on to a greater, more glorious place in which our souls and our spirits, which hopefully we've cared for very well with the spiritual disciplines I've described earlier, are going to go on and flourish for all eternity. And with that belief, death becomes a lot less scary. And then finally, in addition to this idea that death should be an honorable occasion, that we should fear death less as a human race, in addition to the fact that death is simply a passage into glory and eternal bliss, and that's a very hopeful way to live your life, I would also say that I'm not opposed to the use of any compound that allows us to experience the same type of ego death that occurs during death itself. And there's this concept of end-of-life therapies with plant compounds such as psilocybin or DMT or ayahuasca, this dissolution of ego that can even occur in a responsible setting during that rite of passage into manhood that I talked about, that ability to be able to experience just a little taste of what death actually feels like. And this is something that's even being used in cancer patients, for example, now, this whole concept of end-of-life therapy using plant medicine. I think that that's also something that is one of the reasons that God placed those compounds upon this planet, not only for things like, microdosing and enhancing cognition or going into berserker mode to go into battle, but also being able to experience just a taste of death so that when death approaches, we're able to be in a more peaceful, bliss-like state simply because we know what that discomfort of ego disillusion actually feels like. And so I certainly think there's a role that plant medicine would have to play here as well in terms of preparing one to face one's own mortality.
I love it. I love it. All right, this is the last question I'm going to ask, and I want to thank you for two things. I want to thank you for your honesty and openness about these topics, number one, but also want to thank you for being the first guest on the launch of this new series of Fathers and Sons. I really couldn't think of anybody that I wanted to have on the show as the first guest more than you. So here's the last question. When you're gone, how do you want your boys to finish this sentence? My dad was.
My dad was a man of God, because again, I think that being a man of God and looking at the very being who created us as the ultimate example of what it means to be a good father equips us to really step into the role of going beyond boyhood and being a true leader, a true father, a true king, and dare I say something very, very similar to what you might see if you were to watch the movie or read the book Chronicles of Narnia, and you see Aslan, peaceful warrior, empire of the entire world, or emperor of the entire world, fierce but loving, kind and dependable, but able to, rip your head off with a swipe of the claw, if necessary. Something you fear, but something you also respect. And that idea of a father, a leader, a king, and an Aslan is what I want to be remembered as by my boys. So I would say a man of God, because it couches all of that into one phrase, in my opinion.
Beautiful, man. That was beautiful. Have a great day. When are you going elk hunting?
I'm going to head down to New Mexico. I'm actually going to take my boys out after whitetail this coming weekend. And then a couple days later, I'm hopping on a plane to head down to New Mexico, flying to Albuquerque, and I'll be going after elk for about 6 days down there with one of my buddies.
Is elk by lottery only there, or can you just get a big game tag and hunt elk?
The only way, because I was going to go Idaho and they sold out. So the only way I could get out of state tags there was I had to go through an outfitter. So I'm gonna be going through an outfitter down in New Mexico.
That's even better anyway. Listen, Ben, thank you for being here today, brother. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm honored that you had me, Carl. I love the work that you're doing. I love your new hairdo, by the way, too. That's a new one.
My COVID gray hair.
I love it. I love it.
All right, man. Have a great weekend, okay?
All right. I'll catch you on the flip side, man. Keep up the great work.
Okay, brother.
All right, later.
All right, we're going to take one quick commercial break. I just want to go over some things that we did this week and what we're doing next week. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Better, be healthier and happier. If you don't sweat profusely on a regular basis, you won't feel as good as you could. Studies have shown the power of infrared sauna. Infrared penetrates 1 to 2 inches into the body. It helps those with back pain, fibromyalgia, arthritis, depression, and anxiety. Patients get relief from infrared sauna. The Good Health Sauna has been shown to be an exercise mimetic, conveying many of the same benefits as cardio. There are a lot of reasons people buy a Good Health Sauna, but the bottom line is you will be a much happier, healthier person by using the Good Health Sauna every day. You'll crave it, you'll love it, and it will be the best purchase you have ever made. Good Health Saunas provide commercial-grade saunas for in-home and commercial use, backed by the best lifetime warranty in the industry. Unmatched customer service and the best financing makes owning one easy and will fit any budget. Go to goodhealthsauna.com/superhumanradio to learn more and save 25% off. Chronic stress leaves us tired, distracted, and physically vulnerable. Apollo Neuro is here to help you take control. Apollo Neuro is a new wearable that trains your nervous system to be more resilient to stress. Apollo's gentle vibrations use your sense of touch to help you recover from stress, going from fight or flight to rest and digest so you can relax, get to sleep, focus, and stay healthy. Developed by physicians and neuroscientists, Apollo Neuro has been tested in multiple clinical trials and is proven to improve heart rate variability, the key biometric of stress. Special offer for friends of Superhuman Radio. Try Apollo Neuro today and get 15% off your purchase at apolloneuro.com/superhuman. That's APOLLONEURO.com/superhuman. I love beef. And if you love beef, listen up. I've discovered the best tasting beef in the world, and that's not an exaggeration, at Piedmontese.com. The Piedmontese breed is famous from Italy for being lean and unbelievably tender, with half the fat and calories of traditional beef. Even typically tough cuts are tender when it comes from the Piedmontese cows. And for the first time ever, Piedmontese cows are being raised here in the USA. Get 25% off all beef and free shipping on orders of $100 or more at Piedmontese.com with code SHR. Go to Piedmontese.com and use code SHR today. You will never eat any other type of beef ever again.
Among the easiest and most popular ways to experience the life-altering benefits of hemp, Planet Earth CBD soft gels offer fast-acting effects as they release quickly. Made in a GMP-compliant, US FDA-registered facility, you can count on Planet Earth's safe soft gels. These soft gels provide temporary relief from pain and so much more. Manufactured with the calming combination of chamomile and melatonin, you got yourself a long-needed CBD solution. 25 milligrams of nano-emulsified hemp extract per serving with anti-inflammatory agency. Planet Earth sleep-supporting soft gels will have you forgetting about today's worries for a better tomorrow. Unwind with Planet Earth CBD today.
Did you know that your gut is referred to as your second brain? In fact, at least 90% of your serotonin, your happiness chemical, is created in your gut. If you don't take care of your gut, you won't feel good, period. Bioptimizers recently released Cognibiotics, a new breakthrough probiotic formula that is clinically proven to enhance your brain function, your mood, and overall mental health. Most probiotics often include conflicting strains or quantities and can cancel each other out. Cognibiotics delivers the exact strain you need in exactly the right ratios and quantities. With a 365-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee, you can try them out for yourself to start feeling the incredible difference Cognibiotics makes in your mood, mind, and performance. For an exclusive offer to my listeners, go to cognibiotics.com/SHR. That's COGNIBIOTICS.com/SHR and use code SHR10. Are you still on the fence about Body Protection Complex BPC Oral from drseeds.com? Listen to Maggie Kuhn, one of the owners of the C-Bus Lifting Company gym in Columbus, Ohio.
I had been having some nagging tendon issues that weren't injuries, just things that were annoying. You know, I'm 58 years old, so just older tendon kind of issues. For us powerlifters, you know, we really don't stop training when we have just nagging issues. We just kind of keep pushing through. And I started the BPC. What I noticed was I was doing some heavy tricep stuff that would have killed me before when I had an elbow problem, and I was able to do those with literally no pain at all.
Go to drseeds.com, DRSEEDS.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your bottle of BPC Body Protection Complex today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
After getting off benzos 4.5 years ago, I had an issue with focus and concentration.
Let me start it again.
After getting off benzos 4.5 years ago, I had an issue with focus and concentration, and I tried every neurotropic you could possibly imagine, and none of them worked really. I had a lot of side effects from several of them, but no focus and concentration. I tried Cognibiotics about 2 weeks ago and I've been using it every day since, and it's been absolutely amazing.
Longtime listener Dylan Goutreau, you may have heard his voice on another commercial because he used the chill pill, and that's how he has stopped using benzodiazepines. If you go to the URL shrnetwork.biz/betterbrain, you can save up to 49% off Cognibiotics from Bioptimizers. I don't think you have to hear much more than that. Here's a guy who's used different types of nootropics. And keep in mind, different types of nootropics work for different people. I'm experimenting with a stack that we're going to be releasing very shortly from Pure Nootropics. And what I've learned is, depending on what neurochemicals you're deficient in, salbutamine may not work for everybody if they don't have a deficiency in that particular form of B vitamins. Teocrine may not work for everybody. Dynamine may not work for everybody. So you really have to find out. In Dylan's case, if Cognibiotics is working for him, then the cognitive issues he's having are from his gut. And we know that this happens. We know that brain fog comes from the gut. I mean, this is well understood. So, but yeah, I mean, if you if you want to try something to see if it improves your cognition and you do have gut problems, I would recommend that you try Cognobiotics, shrnetwork.biz/betterbrain. We have some great shows next week. Dr. Sean Amara is joining us Monday. John, let me just get my calendar out real quick and look at this. Yeah, he's coming on Monday, which is really exciting because he's coming to talk to us about high carb versus high carb vegan versus keto carnivore, low carb, high fat carnivore with Dr. Sean Amaro. He looks at all of these different diet approaches, and he's got some really interesting information to talk about. Also next week, Shannon and Ron Penna will be joining us. Shannon's going to give us another some cooking tips for cooking foods at home that don't have high sugar in them, because obviously this is something we're all trying to get away from. She has some tips on how to use a protein powder called casein in your food preparation. And it's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people that just can't get healthy versions of certain foods because there's some quality of that food missing, some texture. And Shannon has become an expert on taking the average meal, the average snack food, the average dessert, and making it low carb, sugar free, but still taste amazing. And so they're going to be coming on next week to talk to us about that. We have lots of great shows all week, thanks to Elisa Profumo. Also, we are looking for people who have been watching the show, who enjoy the show, and have an opinion about the show to send us their story, a little 60-second, no more than 3 minutes selfie video on your phone of what do you like about the show? What do you don't like about the show? Maybe you don't like the way I pronounce certain words. Say that. I'm a big boy. I got thick skin. I hear it all the time. But I would really appreciate it if you've been watching the show for any time and you've gotten anything from the show. If you take a minute, point your phone at your face, turn the video on, and just let it go. And it doesn't have to be very long. It could be very, very short, no more than 3 minutes. And then once it's done, you can upload it by going to shrnetwork.biz/yourstory. And you can upload the video there. We're going to create a whole library of these videos, and we're going to start releasing them. And I'd appreciate it if you've gotten anything from this show. Help me out and do this for me. That's it. Today is Friday. I really don't have anything else to say. I appreciate all of it. That was a fascinating interview. I mean, I still think that was an amazing interview. During the commercial break, I texted Elisa and I said, I'm so glad that I'm doing this series. I really think it's going to help. In fact, I'm going to send my son the interview I just did with Ben, because I may not have had the insights. I wasn't the enlightened person I am today when I was first raising children. And I would love my son to hear those things. I don't know that my son is a wonderful young man. I mean, respectful, hardworking, industrious, intelligent, great sense of humor, kind. So he's got all those things. There are some things that I maybe didn't teach him that it's not too late for him to learn. But more importantly, he's going to have children someday. He's probably going to have a boy. Hopefully the name Lenore will keep going. He's the only one of the Lenores, because all my other cousins are girls. And so he's the only one that carries this name forward, Lenore. So I hope he has at least a boy. But I would love for him to listen to that, because that was fascinating. I mean, there's a lot of people who like to break Ben's chops for whatever reason. Haters just love to hate. Doesn't matter what it is. But I have so much respect for Ben. No, not just because of who he has become, but the center of the family that he is as well. He's got a lovely family, and he walks the walk. He doesn't just tell people that this is what you should do. He does those things. And so you gotta love a guy like that. I don't care whether you agree with him or not. You gotta love a guy like that, because he is authentic, and that is something we are missing from society today. Thanks to Instagram and Facebook and touch-up photos apps and all this other stuff, there is a level of inauthenticity in our population today. It's staggering. But But when you meet authentic people like Ben Greenfield, you just can't help but feel good about them. You can't help but really like them. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here for the maiden voyage of this episode. If you know someone that we should have on the show of fathers and sons, please email your suggestions to onair@superhumanradio.net. And please share this show. As I ask you all the time, share all the shows and help more people. And I'm going to get home and work on my mission statement, my personal mission. I'm 62 years old. It's not too late to learn new things. Not too late at all. See you Monday. Have a great and safe weekend.